Hello, friends. Welcome back. Good to see you yet again. Wait a minute for folks to keep popping in here. Hey, Wayne. Hey, Ron. Hey, Stephen, Donnie. Good to see you all. A couple people still popping in here, so we'll let them filter in. Hello, hello, hello. All right, and oops, let's get that. Let's get this person let in here. And then I'll give an intro. We'll get running, even though I'm sure a few more people will filter in here. And today, you know what? Today, you all, just to let you know, you have the capacity to unmute yourself. So if people want to chime in, feel free. As I'm here on my own now without David Anderson. So sometimes it's here. It's hard to know whether, I feel like I'm talking out into the silence, right? More so than I used to be. It's manageable, but anyways. So I'll give a quick intro here to what we're doing today, and then we'll get started. And it's going to be an interesting session. So welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. We have on interesting folks in the piano industry and even slightly beyond. This is a show that's brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, which is an online educational resource that offers you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. We finally have tickets or passes, whatever you want to call them, on sale for the for the convention coming up here in September. Very excited about that because we have the flexibility of digital world and the internet. We're trying out some new stuff, so we're going to have hour-long lectures this time instead of 2-hour. We're actually going to span things over 3 different days, 3 weeks in a row. So it's not just kind of a long, drawn-out process over multiple days in a row. So we're going to have the 2nd, the 10th, and the 18th of September. So give you a little bit of break time in between learning sessions so you can do some work and kick back and absorb the information that we're going to disseminate there. Wayne Ferguson, who's here, is going to be teaching. Carl Lieberman's going to teach a class for Cybertuner. We're going to have Rayburn Piano Works representing there. We're going to have Chris Brown. We're going to have Sally Phillips. We're going to have Tom Strange, who has been on the program here at least once. He's got the Music Museum and works on square pianos. He's out there in the Georgia area. So I've also got a few extras. So what I'm trying to do with these conventions now is take the opportunity to, create something that's more industry wide, that encompasses more facets of the piano industry than just us technicians. So I'm going to have a couple of extra days beyond the 2nd, the 10th, and the 18th, where we're going to have some piano masters of playing piano come in and be able to teach some lessons. So Frederick Chu is going to come in and teach about pedaling. Going to have my good friend Chano Dominguez, who's Spanish, come in and talk about how he integrates Spanish flamenco music with jazz and creates piano music out of that. Fascinating stuff. Got a great pianist named Freddie Ravel, who's going to share a little bit of wisdom with us as part of this. He is an OG of the music industry who's played with Madonna and Earth, Wind and Fire and Al Jarreau, and now is a speaker, a corporate speaker and presenter and things like that. He's going to come in and share some information with us. So it's looking to be a really, really cool thing, and it's ever expanding. So without further ado, though, I'll start today's session, and I'll give you a little bit of a mea culpa on this one. So Danny Kaintop was the scheduled guest for today, and it turned out he was not able to join us live, but So the other day recently, we decided we would do a pre-recorded session. No problem. We actually sort of both happy to say and sorry to say we had an excellent conversation for a good hour that ended up that his part of it did not get recorded. So what I'm going to do today is share with you a couple things, a couple takeaways from the conversation with him, because I think it's still some interesting information. And then we might break it up and do some chatting amongst us. So that's the plan for today, and open to whatever you have to share. And then maybe even beforehand, hopping into talking about Danny, just give a little bit of a reflection on an event that happened last weekend, which I think probably the majority of you know about this, and some of you were even present, is we had a memorial service in the Los Angeles area for David Anderson, which was pretty incredible. Carl had the opportunity to be there and to speak a little bit. I was able to speak a little bit about David. A beautiful, one of the most incredible memorials I could have ever imagined. Beautiful service. Outdoor garden in his yard where his wife, who's a sculptor, has all these beautiful sculptures of the human form on display, and it basically was a party. They would have parties in their yard, musical parties over the years, and kind of brought back that tradition for the event last Sunday. And everything from a live rock band to a lot of beautiful ceremonial things and people giving beautiful speeches and things like that. We had a lot of fun. There was foods and drinks afterwards, and a lot of warm connecting and relating to others. Carl, I saw you unmuted. Did you have say something to add there?
Yeah, I would like to say a couple of things.
For sure.
This, as Ethan said, this was a beautiful event. They started the whole thing by getting everyone to, like you would at a meditation center, to be mindful and to pay attention to your breath and to calm down. And the whole tenor of the event was really special. But I would like to share one thing that was going on. I mean, we all know David as a piano technician and as a person. But another side of him was really prominent at this event. He was a fucking rock and roll musician. He was just a killer musician. So they had all of these guys from his bands who he had played with and who are master musicians come and play. But they had some tapes running, videos running. And they had a tape of David singing When a Man Loves a Woman, the Percy Sledge song with his band. And I mean, he channeled his inner Al Green. He was on his knees. He was screaming his lungs out. I mean, it was like, whoa, this guy was just a real black R&B singer who played guitar, bass, drums, and trombone. And really getting to see David in his prime do this thing was an eye-opener. I mean, he's talked about being a musician and we've heard some of his music and everything, but to just see him really, really doing it, he was a rock and roller. So it was a special event.
Sorry, I was muting myself while you were talking. Agreed. I think, as you said, I think I caught this as you said, in many ways, he was a black man, especially the way that he sang. I mean, he was indecipherable from sort of the just traditional soul music that you could have found. And lots
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, as long as you don't call me a racist, that's fine.
Okay. I had the pleasure to be at Dave's 3 times. I think third time I was there, I got him to pull out all of the stuff that he did, and we had an hour in Tanya's shop listening to all of this stuff, and it was effing believable what he was playing. Like I was mortified on his talent on guitar playing and playing. It was unbelievable, and his singing and. It was, and they had quite a success, and they were happening, so it was pretty awesome. to get to hear that.
Yeah.
It's
And
just my
maybe,
comment.
and maybe sometime today I'll also share his wife Tanya. They would do a date night once a week for many years, and so she, of course, in sort of reflecting on his life and everything over the past several weeks, she's been going through some of the little notes that he wrote. He would write her these notes every week, poems and things like that. And he was a poet, as well as being a rock musician and songwriter and so on and so forth. So she included a poem in the program that he wrote. And you know what, maybe before we cut off today, I'll read that, because I've been sharing it with a lot of people recently, because it's a beautiful poem among many others that he put together. And I'm glad that she shared that. So in addition, before we dive in, let's see if I can grab a link here. So do you have that link at hand, Carl? To the YouTube video?
Memorial?
I have it. Here it is.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's still up and running.
No, it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Okay, great. So I'll put that in the chat as well. So anybody that wasn't able to be there, you should
still. 2.5 hours. It's a long thing, but I really think it was we should all be so lucky to have to be remembered like this. I mean, it was a beautiful event.
Yeah. So I put the link in the chat there, Carl. I don't know what happened. It says removed by the uploader. So I don't know what's going on there. You guys can let me know, or maybe you have a different link, Carl. So let me know if you have one.
Okay.
I'm sure, a lot of people have been wanting to disseminate that. So hopefully there'll be something to share. And you can see what that was like, because it was great, even remotely. So, okay, so I'll share that poem later, but let's dive in. I do want to talk a little bit, because I think there is some value to share from my conversation with Danny, even though I can't actually play it for you. So, he's a guitar maker. He started out kind of playing classical guitar. I actually grew up with him. His father was an architect, and one of the projects that they did together, which I was a witness to when he was in high school, was they made a guitar together. They made like an electric guitar together. But I was surprised to find out that after he studied music as a classical guitar player, he got into the idea of becoming a guitar maker. And so he went back to school, studied design at Columbia College Chicago, I believe, and started apprenticing with a violin maker there, Michael Darnton, who we should be having on a program in the future here. And basically picked up the skills to learn how to make, not only do some violin work, but now make custom archtop guitars. And so I'll share just a few things that were interesting from our conversation, and then again we can move on to some other things. So we talked about three main things in our conversation, the two of us. One was hand tools. The other was kind of, issues that you develop being a person who works with their body and with their hands, so kind of like physical health issues. And then we talked a little bit about import-export issues, which some of us have to deal with, not a great deal of us, but it's something interesting as people who deal with these instruments, thinking about what happens when we have to, cross borders and move them around and stuff like that. So first topic, we kind of talked about modern tools, what he finds useful, what he doesn't, and also the kind of vintage tools or the hand tools that he finds useful. So the one thing that came across in terms of modern equipment that he does appreciate was CAD software. And he said he learned a lot about that in design school, and that's been really, really incredible for him. And he said that the famous guitar, the famous violin maker Stradivarius, he said he would have been, he thinks, a CAD nerd, and his argument there was, there's such beauty in the math behind the musical instruments, and the lines and the forms and the shapes and the resonances and things like that. And so what he's found is having that kind of software at his disposal allows him to really easily, take mathematical principles and, make something beautiful out of them within an environment where he can, iterate and create and experiment and try things out. And then of course he's got to make things by hand in the end. But he appreciates kind of that environment to be able to experiment and create his own designs. And he's made a lot of use of that. And then on top of that, he said, what he does is he creates instruments, or the parts of an instrument. So there's sort of like a top plate to a guitar and there's a back plate to a guitar. And I think those are two major pieces that require some specialized design. And so he'll create the general form of it using like a CNC machine. But even after that, he puts a lot of time into hand working it and making it custom to, what he wants to do with it. And that leads on to this topic of the hand tools. And, interestingly enough, the sort of two main tools that he mentioned are two main tools that we might use if we use hand tools. And that would be like chisels and planes. And so a couple of things that he mentioned were, number one, it's a lot harder to get the good tools that he could have at one time on something like eBay. So he said, let's say 10 years ago, he used to be able to hop on eBay and find like a batch of 5 or 6, vintage chisels, order them all, and then pick out the best one. And then he'd even have extras that he could, resell or do something else with. And he said, nowadays, you just can't do stuff like that. They're really expensive or you can't find these things. He also said a lot of people have taken up, hand tool work as a hobby or something, or guitar making. And so they're also in the market for these things. So it's really hard. And he said, in addition to the basic tool structure, which he finds it useful to get vintage tools because they're sort of have some more durability or something special about their design. It's actually the blades that he can get a hold of that are specialized. Of course, they're not sharp enough. He's got to sharpen them. But the actual equipment, the raw materials that you have in that equipment, he said that he really has an appreciation for. He also said, and I'm not an expert at using chisels, maybe some other folks here are. I definitely have been, had the fortune to be around folks who are using chisels and kind of see the sharpening process and things like that. He said he's more of a work with the tool type than it has to be, perfectly sharp all the time. So he'll definitely sharpen it regularly and often, but he more wants to get his hands in there and work, and use the tool, and then, sharpen it as needed. Whereas an alternative could be like, you're only going to ever work when it's perfectly sharp, and put a lot of time and energy into getting that done. So I do think that could be a difference of opinion between various users of tools, but that was something he mentioned about his process. We also talked extensively, because we talked about chisels, and somebody else might have insights on this, you're free to share. The first place I think about chisels is on the bridge of the piano. And it was really kind of fun talking to him as a guitar maker, because he had just as many questions for me as I had for him in sort of like, what are the details of how your instrument works, and it's easy maybe for him to make assumptions about how a piano works based on what he knows about how a guitar works. So we started talking about bridges for a while. So that was kind of interesting, because I was telling him, that the notching on the bridge was required, to leave a space for the string to vibrate, and trying to sort of explain to him how the bridge pins kind of extend out of the bridge and create a contact point. And so that inspired him to talk about the bridges of his hollow body archtop guitars. And it was interesting, that's a part where I think you guys being able to hear our discussion would have been a little bit more advantageous, but it sounded to me like the bridge of a guitar is very integral to its tone. And he said that he put a lot of time and energy and thought into creating the bridges for his guitars. And he asked me, like, for example, how much the string would be in contact on the bridge of the piano, and as I thought about it, I said, well, that's pretty standard. And then, the really unique part about it is to make sure that the contact point where the string touches the bridge pin and the bridge and all that is like a very specialized point, so you don't get any sound artifacts and you get the clearest tone and so on and so forth. But that wasn't necessarily beyond like making sure that the string is seated properly, wasn't necessarily a place of tone manipulation within the instrument of a piano like the hammer is, right? But he talked a lot about how he could potentially manipulate the tone of the guitar based on, how much contact the string had with the top of the bridge, and what angle that bridge was at, and what material it was made of, and how he carved it, and things like that. And so I'll share my screen for a second because this was part of our conversation. Let's see here. So first of all, it was interesting. I searched archtop guitar bridge, and he's like, oh, hey, look, there's some pictures from my website. So apparently he must know something either about what he's talking about, or at least about search engines and optimization and social media, because his guitar images have ended up on the top of Google search list. So this is actually a bridge, some bridges that he created for his guitar. So we might as well take a look at them. Again, I'm not going to be able to give you the details as much as he was able to about what he did to create them. But yeah, we can take a look at them, and I can tell you some things that he told me about these bridges. So number one, this is hand carved. I'm sure there's like a general shape that he probably gets, again, maybe with a CNC machine or something like that. But this is a place where he puts a lot of time and attention into creating the nuances of the bridge. These sort of, I don't know what you call them, like holes or decorative areas they're there a bit for decoration and also a bit for function. And so they create, maybe they might take some mass away from the bridge. Just like certain parts of the piano might have sort of like a decorative hole in them, but that also is meant to remove a bit of mass from what it is. I also asked him, is this bridge glued on to the guitar? And he told me it's not. Basically what happens is he carves out, it's almost like a little concave section underneath these areas that come into contact. And, it had a special way of taking like a piece of sandpaper and putting the bridge on top of the guitar body and sort of pulling the sandpaper out from in between the two things to create a nice matched surface between the two things. But of course, this contact point is essential. And it is interesting that it's not held on there by glue. And it's not even, he said it's taboo on, especially we talked about like violins. On cheap violins, sure, they might make a little mark in the body where the bridge might go back onto the violin. But as you get into higher tiers of quality, that's a bit taboo to sort of, let's say all the strings were taken off the instrument, have some kind of a marker there to show you where to put it back. So there may be some fading in the finish of the instrument or something like that indicates for you where it goes. But in general, it's a completely separate piece. It's held on there by tension between the guitar strings and the top plate of the guitar. So anyways, that was really interesting, some of the things he was talking about. And clearly he kind of tweaks and carves and changes a little bit about the bridge top surface to change the tone as he likes with the instrument. And so he said, I think that this one, which one? This Amati bridge, the one that we're looking at here, I believe this is a newer incarnation of his bridge design. And then this is one that's a little bit older. and he's constantly evolving, like how he creates the bridge of a guitar, which I found really interesting. And then, of course, you all know piano bridges, but I had to, it's funny, I had to like show him a piano bridge to kind of make sure his head was in the right space about how it functions, how it works. And once I showed him the images, he could understand, where those notches were, how they were making space for the vibration of the strings, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure there's probably a lot to bridge construction that parallels what goes on with the guitar bridge construction, but clearly it's a less fine-tuned kind of a procedure, because we have to have these long bridges that are there to support all of the strings, versus the guitar. You've only got 6 strings, so you're going to you might as well be custom about, each point of bridge contact. So anyways, that was an interesting part of the discussion. I'm curious at this point, again, I'm not an expert in either of these things, piano construction or guitar construction. Is there anybody that's dealt with, bridges or notching bridges, or, like the physics of bridges, that has any comments? No pressure. Yeah. Bill?
I think I'll step up, Ethan.
Yeah, how's it
Can
going?
you hear me all right?
Totally.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about his description of, how the bridge affects tone in guitars. I tend to apply those same things in the piano as well, but I think the way that we approach it is kind of like you alluded to right at the end of your talk here just now, that we deal with it on a much more gross scale. So you've got this huge instrument, but certainly construction of the bridge can have a dramatic impact on the tone of the piano. We routinely will make adjustments to bridge mass, for example, whether that's like you described, carving out holes in certain sections of the bridge that may be too massive, or vice versa, especially common right after the bass tenor break at the very bottom end of that long bridge. Very often we need to add mass because there's not enough mass in that area. So, you can experiment. In fact, it's kind of a fun little experiment anybody can do on any piano, really. Just take a pair of like 5 or 6 inch vice grips and play a note that's like at the bottom of the long bridge, and just listen to what that tone is, and then clamp on a pair of 6 inch vice grips to one of those speaking length bridge pins and see what that does to the tone. And often it's a pretty remarkable contrast in some instruments. Some instruments don't respond to it too much, and particularly well-designed bridge instruments don't respond to it too much, but a lot of times you kind of get this really boomy sound at the low end of the bass bridge, and adding some mass there often can make a pretty significant positive change to those instruments. So definitely tone impacts, and I think, getting into the more engineering side of it, really what we're playing with is, oh great, my mind went blank, impedance values. So you're looking at the impedance value that the bridge has, and it's not so much that there's one impedance value that's great. It's a matter of matching the impedance values to the soundboard design, to the scaling, to the hammers. All of these things work together to sort of conspire to create whatever that tone is that's produced.
Yeah, interesting. So there's more parallels than I might have even imagined. Anybody else, any comments about that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Wayne?
Yeah, so I had an issue a few years ago with a piano that was rebuilt, bridge pins put in, and I determined that I guess the wood wasn't dried out. Bridge pins were put in, they were kind of on the loose side. I took them out, re-drilled, put oversize in, and then I experimented. I do guitar rebuilding as a hobby. I make a few guitars, and I have these pucks. This is a steel puck, 1 inch by 6 inches. It's about it's 8 pounds, and I'll put a piece of felt down, and I'll put that right on the bridge pin sometimes if I'm having issues, and I can use this round edge also. It'll sit right up on the front roll of pins or the back roll, right? And I'll put a piece of felt down just to get an idea if there's overtones like false beats, or is there improvement in tone. I've also even put these on the soundboard, and I added 2 or 3 to give that mass to see what's going on. So just it is a tool that I just want to mention that. That's it.
Yeah. And when you say puck, I know you're out there in Canada, but this doesn't really have anything to do with a hockey puck, right? It's just the shape.
No, it's a much larger.
That'll definitely knock some teeth out. I know hockey players are notorious for having teeth knocked out. I don't know if it's from the fighting or the pucks that hit them in the face, or both, or whatever.
And so I have to contribute now. Again, Wayne mentions pucks. So this is a brass rod. It's about 1.25 inches in diameter. And this is what I use to do the same thing. I just take it to a hacksaw and cut off pucks of various thicknesses to give me different weights, to do almost exactly what Wayne's describing, to try different weights to see, instead of doing sort of what Wayne describes as sort of that gross assessment of like, hey, can I make an improvement here or not? Which is a great, I don't have something like that. So that's given me a really cool idea of something to add to my kit. Whereas what I'm doing here is I've already determined I want to make an improvement. And so now I can sort of micro adjust just how much mass I want to add. And it's very easy to experiment, attach a little bit more, see what the difference is, and sort of keep working your way by trial and error with just different size discs to change that impedance. So yeah, it's really cool. I like the puck.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing it, guys. Yeah, so we talked about, Danny and I talked about hand tools a little bit, and of course we talked about chisels, we talked about planes, and he also talked about gouges, and I think he uses gouges to kind of create shapes within the instrument, like especially the concave areas, sort of move from larger to more fine accuracy instruments. I was interested that we actually didn't get too broad into the types of hand tools he used, even within just our conversation. But he did say, he could fill a couple of large tool boxes, like, pretty massive tool boxes with the hand tools that he uses. And he said that his mentor, prided himself on that, he could just take a set of hand tools and do his job, pretty much do almost anything and everything he wanted to do on a violin to, I think, create the instrument even from scratch using hand tools, which is pretty cool stuff. So it was kind of an interesting segue from hand tools into the body and how it gets worn down. and I think, like, especially using hand tools, the advantage, is in the accuracy, in the nuance and things like that. But then at the same time, you've got repetitive movements and things like that. He was complaining to me that he's got, back issues, and, he's a relatively young guy. He's younger than me, even. I don't know, I guess he's probably mid to late 30s, and already, experiencing back issues and things like that. So, he just said that he's getting deeper into, finding ways to make sure and address those things and prevent those things, creating his own tools, using more customized tools that are meant for the job so that they don't put as much strain on his body. And then just being more cognizant of that. And then the ever-present topic of, not ever-present, but it always comes up, I think, in this conversation, is the Alexander technique. He said, I've heard people talk about Alexander technique in piano tuning world. And he said that people tell him about it too. He has not been a practitioner or a student of the Alexander technique, but I've been hearing about that topic and thinking that it probably needs to be part of what we address in our content at some point. So that's just another vote for, we should probably have someone who's an expert in that come in and have a chat with us or teach us something at some point in the future. So I don't know, that was that piece of the conversation, just kind of talking about taking care of our systems and our bodies. And all I know about that on my end is, be careful, take care of our ears, use earplugs, make sure we get a good posture going when we're doing things, maybe even switch between left and right hands when we're tuning, if we can get used to that. And, you know, get into good routines of like stretching and yoga, so that we can sort of rejuvenate our systems in between the work that we do. And again, I don't know does anybody else have anything to add to that topic? If not, I would move on to the next one and chat a little bit more. But yeah, Donnie, what did you have to say?
Well, back to your earlier topic, have you ever run into, I think it was a Mr. Springer or a Sprunger who was in the violin world and was working with changing the angle of the strings to, I think his expression was to add an octave of length, a foot of length, not an octave of length, to the piano. I first heard it at a convention. I was just walking across the floor, and here was a very small piano with what I thought was a beautiful tone. And so I had to go over and look and see. I went ahead and experimented on a Chickering quarter grand that I had, and did it with a group of amateur pianists. They all came and played and recorded before I did the project, and then came back afterwards. But the period in between was so long, several of them couldn't remember what they played. I think the general impression was they liked it. And I think the word for it was Wapanizing. And I don't know if Wapan was their company name.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I saw you put a comment in here. Experimenting with the approach of the string from the bridge in the piano world was demonstrated at PTHE convention called Wapanizing. Following their programming, did this with two pianos. And so you're saying it somehow... It
changed the angle so that the approach was more like a violin, straight on rather than angled.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So Wapan bridges were designed by Tim Coates, is the guy that started the Wapan bridge thing. And just from a visual perspective, essentially, when you see a Wapan bridge, you're going to see an extra set of bridge pins. And that the bridge pins, rather than being angled to create, opposite way, rather than being angled to create that sort of staggered path through the bridge pins are actually driven in straight. I think the front two are straight, and then the trailing one, I believe, is still angled to keep it against the front two. But yeah, it takes that string path as it moves over the bridge and straightens out the path over the bridge a bit. It's a little bit more complex than that, but yeah, it's Tim Coates and it's the Wapan Bridge. I should be able to find it. Quick search.
Oh, interesting. Thanks for sharing on that. Anybody else know about that or have any insights?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Johan?
Yeah, Johan. Sorry, I have to turn on myself. Many years ago, probably in the early 80s, I visited the Bluthner factory. Now we know that at that time, it was still behind the Iron Curtain, and frequently goods were simply not available. So Mr. Bluthner, Sr., he told me they simply did not have bridge pins. The only thing that was available was needle bearings, very high quality, smooth steel. And you could get thousands of them, but no bridge pins. So he started using these expensive needle bearings. And the amazing thing was, from what I thought I was seeing and hearing, that we know that when we tune a piano, the best thing is to seat the strings first, because they climb up the little bridge pins. The side gets roughened a little bit, serrated, the string does not slide back, even though it's angled. And that's where the Wapan system perhaps came in as well. And so we need to seat strings. When you use a material like needle bearings, you don't need to seat strings anymore because they don't stay up. They remain in close contact bearing down on the wood of the bridge, solving many problems. Of course, it's an expensive proposition, and I have not seen any company take Bluthner up on it. And Bluthner itself is, I think, also not using it anymore. But it's something I like to share. Now we're talking about bridges.
No, thank you. Fascinating. I feel like somebody else was about to say something. Was that you, Wayne? Or did I just catch you?
Yes, it was. Yeah, there was a technician that was experimenting with this in Winnipeg years ago when it first came out, and it was quite remarkable, the difference. It just coupled and really just made, to me, I got the sense is it just made a really good contact, and I didn't really understand, but the angles were sort of more subtle, and it's quite good. But when you were doing this, of course, you had to think about if you were installing this on a piano, you actually had to lay it out. You had to drill pins in and drill into it. So it's quite something to do, and you had to make sure you're going to be very careful and hope that it was all going to work. So it was kind of at the time you were sort of selling this option for a customer. But on the other hand, if you were doing it on a rebuild, it was your own piano, right? So you were adding this feature. So there you go.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. You could add that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's. I'll move on to the last topic that he and I talked about, and then we can open it up to other stuff if there's time. And that was just that, he's dealt with a handful of times, but he was exporting a guitar from United States into Australia. And it just so happened that he's got this headache going on right now because the customs agent in Australia was under the impression that there was some sort of the type of ebony that he used on the guitar was something that needed to be regulated in some way. And so I think it's Madagascar ebony, or that, that if it were to have used that, it would have required some special type of certification, or maybe he wouldn't even be allowed to use that or something. And he happened to use some other type of ebony, which just happens to sound like Madagascar. It was like Makar or, Madagascar or something like that. And so basically he's just in this position where it's very stressful for him because he has a piano, a guitar kind of sitting there, not knowing what's going to happen to it. It's stalled. There's really one person that he has to sort of negotiate with and have Macassar ebony. That's right, Bill. And kind of feeling powerless because he's just got this one person that he's got to kind of convince that he doesn't need like a certification. So that the border agent is kind of saying, hey, okay, fine. You've got this type of ebony. I need some type of certification that, you're allowed to use it or whatever it is. And of course he's going, well, that type of ebony is not regulated. So there are no certifications for it. So I know I don't have a certification. And so it sounds quite stressful. And I thought about that because as an interesting topic for us, possibly just around the other types of issues that we deal with, be it ivory or just general import, export. David Clavins, who we've had here as a guest and also a presenter at conventions, was importing a piano for where he's at, I believe in Latvia, to the Los Angeles area. And I kind of got on board to help out with that process. And, it was quite fascinating to see that it's complicated, and expensive. And so you have to pay certain types of taxes. The value of the instrument has to be reported, and taxes are levied based on that value. The size and the weight of it, of course, matter in this whole exchange. And then at the same time, you have to hire, as far as I could tell, there's people who are like these customs agents who that is their profession, to kind of be a liaison between the person who's the importer exporter and the sort of border agents or customs agents. So, they know the law, they know the rules, they know the regulations. There's a lot of paperwork that needs to get filled out and so on and so forth. And as opposed to, someone like you or me going, oh, let me learn about the laws, regulations, and fill out all the paperwork. They do that every day. So then you just kind of pay them a set fee, and then they do their job negotiating and making sure everything's taken care of in terms of the import export. But then the issue is, hiring yourself a customs agent of sorts to help you with that, making sure that that's all lined up with when the delivery is going to be made. Sometimes you don't know, is it going to be made today, tomorrow, or next week? And then lining that up with the movers that are going to come and pick up the instrument. And then, if the movers, I was trying to negotiate with movers, not knowing if and when the instrument's going to arrive, and going, oh, let's kind of book you for maybe a day and about a week. Movers tend to need to put something into a schedule. And then on top of that, if you don't come grab the instrument when it's time to get it, they will put it in a storage at the port. And then, of course, there's storage fees involved in that. So it can be quite a complicated affair trying to import and export instruments, at least from my, novice exposure to this. But I don't know if that happens between the border of the U.S. and Canada. It's as complicated as overseas deliveries. And has anybody here ever dealt with import export at all? No, thank goodness. All right, so now you know it's a bit of a headache.
I actually do.
Johan?
Yeah, I live in Canada, in Vancouver.
Uh-huh.
So I import goods from our suppliers, and it's very simple.
Nice.
They put it on UPS. I have my own broker because it's half the cost, the brokerage cost, if I were to use UPS. And so it's very straightforward. They always have to put my personal name on it as well, not just the company name, for identification purposes. That has given problems in the past. And otherwise it's very straightforward. The company in the US who sends me the goods applies the freight cost right away, so I don't need to deal with that extra. And I only need to pay my extra outside broker, which is usually a week, 2 weeks after, and the whole thing is done very smoothly. I just had a package from Western Liquid Gross, took 3 days to get here. Fantastic. 138 nice. Canadian dollars. And no hassle, no headache, and I'm very happy.
Excellent. And are you how large are the items you're importing, exporting? Are we talking about full instruments, or are these just parts and things like that? What are you?
It's usually tools and parts.
Tools and parts. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. And you said you have an agent too that you work with quite a bit, so you've kind of got that streamlined, and you know who you're going to use.
Yeah. And in the past, it was much more complicated. I would have to go to the border, to the customs office, fill out all the numbers for each item. There's a different numbers for taxes. All that is passed. That's great.
Nice. Excellent.
It's almost like we're one country in that sense.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, the other piece of that I think that you alluded to is there's a person whose name is going to be on the shipment, and that's important, right? Because they need to know they're giving it to the right person. So if there's any third parties, there needs to be, I think the agent needs power of attorney, signed documents by the person. And then, maybe like you said, if it's a company that's receiving it, maybe that's a little more complicated to sign anything over, because who's signing it, right?
Yeah. And then I just had a parcel a few days ago. The beauty is UPS puts the parcel on the front porch, or operates from the house, and leaves. At that very moment, that person sends me an email through UPS that the parcel had been put on my front porch at 2:06 p.m.
Nice.
At 2:08, I picked up the parcel from the front porch, so that they don't even ring the doorbell anymore. They send you an email.
That's pretty cool.
That it has been delivered. So that's the newest system. Beautiful.
Very cool. Yeah, I started getting this thing. I don't know if anybody else did in in the United States here. It's called USPS Informed Delivery. Has anybody signed up for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. They actually send me an email. It's got pictures of my mail, what's coming, like in the next few days. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
It's interesting. Am I being heard?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm trying to figure out who you are. Who is that
Diane
talking?
Hoffman.
Diane. Hey, how's it going, Diane?
It's interesting that Johann said that because he volunteers at community music school where they teach homeless children music. And he's got a couple of proteges there who want to learn to work on pianos. And I have 3 action models I've been trying to figure out how to send to him. I'm in Vancouver, Washington, not Vancouver, BC. So it's fascinating to hear him bring that up.
There you
I
go.
have-
Let's get them shipped
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's very generous of you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, action models are precious. They're very useful.
Can I make
piece
a
of
quick
equipment.
comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the whole thing, sometimes when keyboards are going back from the United States to Canada, agents, they don't know the difference between ivory and plastic. It's quite often they see something and they think it's ivory right away. So you have to address that right from the get-go. And you have to even put a letter. There's a form that we have called CITES that we have to, it's for endangered or rare things like ivory. But if there was a piano that I had to get shipped to Florida, the movers picked it up, they deliver it, but they had to have all the paperwork. And the forms had to be done in triplicate. So when the border agent got it, it was a declaration from myself saying this was built in 1862. It was original ivory, and I had proof of all that. And once they seen that, it was shipped right through. There was no issues whatsoever. So that's sometimes you have to sort of say this is plastic or this is it's not ivory. So you have to sometimes kind of clarify that.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had, I just remember in my local chapter in New York City and across the PTG, I think a few years ago, it was just a huge issue, the ivory, the regulations that were being, debated and are passed in for the United States and kind of our role in that. And it's just one of those things. Similar thing that we could commiserate on with Danny when it comes to guitars. Hey, we're just music folks. We just want to do something cool and artistic. We're not trying to hurt anybody. We're not, poaching any animals. Most of us are very, gentle souls, but we kind of have to be a part of these regulations, and it becomes a part of our headache for whatever reason.
On the ivory stuff, the guild was involved in trying to work with these regulations, but we're nobody. But NARAS, the Grammys, got involved because so many musicians were having their instruments stopped at the border and this sort of thing. And they helped negotiate this whole 200-gram exception, that if it's less than 200 grams, it's part of the instrument, they can do it. But that was something where NARAS really helped out.
Okay, I was not aware of that factor. Yeah, interesting. Very cool. Good to know. I guess, let me see. We got about 5 minutes left. I was going to read that